Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the very best checklists of 1994 across all four sports. Now, this is a part two because when I pulled these cards aside, there were a whole lot more checklists than I wanted to talk about in one video, and I couldn't really leave the others out. So I did a whole video last week talking about checklists that I thought were worth discussing but weren't top 5 material. And here I have the top 7 checklists. So there's a top 5 and there are 2 honorable mentions that are just outside of that look at really a wonderful variety of checklists in 1994. This is quite possibly, or actually, yeah, I'll say quite possibly the best year for checklists for the simple reason that their checklists were really kind of new for being collectible. And so the world was their oyster, and card companies were coming up with a really great array of ideas for checklists. And so you had a great variety, but you also had some really strong ideas that we got to see here before we began to get into more of a templated approach of putting a player on the front and a checklist on the back, which is kind of what we would see for the most part in the latter portion of the decade. But right here we get a really good variety, and this set, or this group, is a lot of fun for that. And we start off with the first honorable mention showing just how really fun these checklists were with Collector's Choice for both football and for basketball. Now, for 1994, with Collector's Choice, the way that they launched was with packs that had some really cool art on the front. There were 4 or 5 different designs, depending on which sport you were collecting, with this pop art. That same art was on checklists, and so in football and basketball we got to see a number of different checklist designs with this very bold, straightforward, and very colorful approach. Now, I don't really mind the white border because the white border works beautifully for the parallels, which in the case of football and for basketball was really important. The white border, really, the big thing that helps me out with this is the fact that there's a lot of white in most of these cards, which allows the border to work in kind of in conjunction with the images. And the images aren't too bold. The backgrounds, the amount of color coming through isn't too bad, so that it's a good combination. But having these really strong, bold pop art images on checklists and making them collectible because they're all stars in the NFL or NBA, that helped out a lot, and it made these cards look great, and they're a great conclusion to each one of these card sets. Now, the other honorable mention that I have is one that surprised me that it dropped out of the top 5, which is Fleer for baseball. Now, Fleer liked to put images on checklists. They'd been doing it a lot, and in 1994, about half of their checklists had images on them. Images ghosted behind the checklist. For Fleer, the baseball set was where we got to see this, and this is quite possibly the best of all of these. While the strength of the football ultra designs or ultra cards are the strongest, most distinct, here, this is where they did it all pretty much perfectly. And it starts with the horizontal orientation. Now, the horizontal orientation works well for the checklist space because it doesn't feel all congested. It's more open and airy. And then also the way that all of the teams are distributed out on the checklist makes it a more unusual checklist, which helps out a lot. But the big thing is the image. Because in baseball, when you have a horizontal image, the baseball player gets lost in the card because he's got to be too small for the image to really work. You can't really see the player too well, so you have to have a lot of clarity. Well, with these cards, the image is ghosted, which means that the player would just disappear, but they cropped in a tight shot of the player, which helps for the player to read beautifully, take up a lot more space on the card, and there's a lot more energy to the image, which that combination is perfect for these cards and helps them to read to the full potential. You add to that the highly lacquered surface and the gold foil, and this card is about as good as you're possibly going to be able to make a ghosted image card. Fantastic how it looks. Now, it's interesting that I have this at just outside the top 5, because at number 5 I have Collector's Choice for baseball. And that shows just how much I really like the images for baseball. Now here you can see that they didn't bother to have borders on the cards. They just let the image run on all sides. But for baseball, the colors are stronger, and that helps so much to make these cards read to the full potential that they could have. You know, all the wrappers had a full bleed image, more or less. But here with these cards, this is a case where these cards really did need it. And there's a little bit of a longing for me to have a little bit of a border on this card, and I don't know why. It's unfortunate because when I look at this art, this is art I'd like to have on my wall. The football and the baseball and the basketball cards, you know, that's my area, but still the art isn't really something I'd like to have on my wall. But the baseball cards, I really would like to have these on my wall. They're just great looking checklists, and that's why I have them here at number 5. But at number 4, I have the one that surprised, I would say it shocked me that it dropped down to number 4. It's Pinnacle for both football and for hockey, but not the regular cards. I mean, the regular cards are perfectly fine. At least with the hockey cards, they do have the team emblems on them, so that's good. But no, it's the Dufex Parallel. And with Pinnacle, this is the only one of all of the where the parallel significantly improves the checklist. So I love the way that it comes across, because this answers that question none of us asked, which is, well, what would a checklist be like with Dufex? Well, now we know. Now the football one is a stronger card because it has a whole Dufex array right out around the border. And then they have a really nice satin finish inside, and that counterpoint is a great combination. But over in hockey, they do more with the card. All the way down the side, there's more going on. It's not a lot. It doesn't overpower. It doesn't even, well, it's not even very clear what's going on. The text is a lot more clear. The other side of the card is more subdued because that's where the checklist is. But then you have all of the logos that appear in a different lighting rhythm than the whole area where the checklist is. And so the card has more going on, which makes it more fun to explore. It's not a clear statement like over in football, so they're both pretty close. I give a little bit of a nod to the hockey cards, though, because there is a little bit more energy, or not more energy, but a little bit more interest going on with the card. Still, I got to have this at number 4 because it is still just a checklist. An interesting one, but it's just a checklist. At number 3, I've got Donruss for baseball. And well, here we go with, this does what they did with Flair, but they did it a little bit better because they have a whole box where you get that tight shot of the player. Good image selection, but this is a card that's all about the player. When I look at this card, I think, okay, this is clearly, in the Beckett's clearly says Rickey Henderson, checklist. I mean, how can it not? Yes, it doesn't talk about Rickey Henderson, but it doesn't need to. This is a card that looks, it's probably a better card than the actual Rickey Henderson card. And this is kind of the precursor to when we would have these cards with an image on the front and a checklist on the back, and they're kind of all about the player on the front. This is very much leading into it. I love the way these Donruss cards come across, and it's really the power, the strength of those images of those stars that makes it all work. So I really like that. But speaking of an image on the front and a checklist on the back, Upper Deck did an even better job with their checklist for their set, where these cards, well, the first thing and the most important thing about these cards is something that's not even coming through for you, which is the fact that these are huge. These were not available in packs. These were box toppers. They're 5x7. They're huge cards. And so you get all this wonderful landscape with, for a card that really looks like it is a HoloView card. It's basically a HoloView card. It's just released with Upper Deck. All this room for Ken Griffey Jr. You have a really big hologram right on the card, and then that wonderful copper foil is just a great texture to the almost iridescent finish of the whole card. And oh yeah, on the back, look how much real estate we have for the checklist. It's really great. Box topper checklists were extremely rare. You know, we had boxes that had checklists on them. 1992 Game Day started that way. Not a lot of them, but we had some. But the idea of doing a box topper checklist was brilliant. Plus, it makes these cards a little bit more rare because you're going to get just about every card in a box, or you're going to have the rate of that. Whereas the 4 checklists here, all of Ken Griffey Jr., come at the rate of, well, each one of the 4 checklists comes at a rate of 1 per 4 boxes, which means that you're going to have 4 times the regular cards than these box toppers, which makes them a little bit more challenging to get, a little bit more valuable. And I mean, just how can you not love having this massive card? It's really, really cool. I love it. But the fact that I have this at number 2 gives you a pretty good feeling for what I feel about the number 1 card, which is a bit of a cheat for me, because normally I like to do these videos looking at main set checklists, or main set stuff. It's rare that I go with something that's more of a specialty set, but look, in the case of the Flair Team USA basketball cards, this is one I could not avoid. This is so cool. It reminds me of the 1991-92 Skybox 3-part Dream Team portrait. And that, I mean, that's a legendary card. Well, here we are 2.5 years later. We have 2 checklists that do something similar with Dream Team 2, which is kind of the original Redeem Team. But the checklist, it carries exactly what you want for the feeling of this exciting team, or as exciting as they are, along with the patriotism, which I think is very clear from the images. It's just a really fun, cool card, but also there's an interesting quirk to this, which is the fact that there are 2 of these, not 2 checklist cards, but 2 sets of checklist cards, 4 total. Because in the set, they only had the original 12 players, but then they had a redemption for the 13th player, where when you got that, you got Kevin Johnson added in. And so that means that both of the checklists or both sets of checklists are a little bit different, which makes it even more fun. But still, a Team USA checklist card that looks like this, yes, please. It's fun. It's not as great looking as the Ken Griffey Jr. card, but this is just so much fun. And so that's what I put it as the best checklist card for 1994. If you disagree with me, please let me know your take on it. If there's a checklist card that you think that I missed, please let me know. Yeah, other than that, do subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much for watching.